Good morning, America. You're waking up to a world where the global oil market is a powder keg and someone just lit a match. We're coming to you live on what could be a defining day for energy prices, foreign policy, and the very real specter of conflict. They certainly are. Overnight, former President Donald Trump, in a series of rapid-fire statements to conservative media, has sent shockwaves through diplomatic and financial circles. In what analysts are calling a classic Trump-era scramble, he levied severe criticism at the current administration's posture toward Iran, specifically regarding the Strait of Hormuz, but the critique came packaged with his own highly contentious proposal. He didn't just critique. He advocated for a dramatic show of force, a move that legal experts across the spectrum are this morning labeling a clear blueprint for an illegal war. Let's break that down. The Strait of Hormuz, for viewers just joining us, is not just another waterway. It's the world's most critical oil choke point. 21 million barrels of oil pass through that narrow channel every single day. That's roughly a third of the world's seaborne oil trade. Control it, and you effectively have your hand on the global economy's throttle. Trump's comments explicitly suggesting a naval blockade or aggressive military posturing to, in his words, stop Iranian aggression, is being seen as a direct call to escalate tensions to a boiling point, and the immediate fallout is in the numbers. Even before the formal opening bell on Wall Street, futures are screaming. Brent crude, the international benchmark, is up over 4% in pre-market trading. West Texas Intermediate is tracking close behind. This isn't mere speculation. This is the market pricing in a genuine risk premium. The fear is palpable. The legal and strategic implications are staggering. A unilateral blockade without UN Security Council authorization or a clear case of self-defense is, under international law, an act of war. It's not a policy shift, it's a potential war crime. Trump's framing, calling the current approach weak and promising to solve the Iran problem, is being viewed by allies and adversaries alike as a return to the maximum pressure campaign, but with a far more volatile and militaristic edge. We're seeing reaction pour in from Capitol Hill. Senior Democrats are issuing statements condemning what they call reckless warmongering. Even some key Republican figures are urging caution, emphasizing the need for congressional approval for any military action of that scale. But the Trump faction is amplifying the message, framing any opposition as weakness in the face of a regime that, they argue, sponsors terrorism and seeks regional dominance. The contradictions in Trump's foreign policy are now laid bare for the world to see, creating a strategic and legal quagmire. On one hand, you have the former president publicly pleading with nations like Russia and Saudi Arabia to increase oil production, framing it as a matter of economic necessity for America. On the other, his rhetoric and the legal framework he championed treat those same nations as adversaries or, at best, transactional partners. This isn't just political hypocrisy, it's a live grenade in the middle of U.S. diplomatic and legal strategy. When Trump openly asks Saudi Arabia to pump more oil, he's doing two things. First, he's validating the Crown Prince, MBS, a leader whose relationship with the Biden administration remains deeply strained over human rights issues. Second, he's telegraphing a profound weakness in the current administration's energy policy, using it as a political cudgel. But from a strategic standpoint, it's a gift to Riyadh, amplifying their leverage. They can now play both sides, extracting concessions from a sitting president while cultivating a backup plan with his potential successor. The message to allies in Europe and Asia is chaos. Which America do you deal with? The one in the Oval Office or the one on Truth Social? Then there's Russia. Trump's recent comments urging Putin to release dirt on the Biden family, framed as a public service, cross a line from political opportunism into something far more dangerous. National security analysts describe this as an open invitation for foreign interference, effectively gaslighting the American public about the sanctity of U.S. elections. It's a POV that treats geopolitics like a reality TV show, where any alliance or betrayal is valid if it drives the ratings, or in this case, the polls. The strategic cost is a complete erosion of deterrence. Why would any adversary take U.S. condemnations or threats seriously when a leading presidential candidate openly courts them for personal political gain? The legal implications are even murkier. While a private citizen has broad free speech rights, federal law, including the Logan Act, prohibits unauthorized individuals from negotiating with foreign governments on disputes with the United States. Legal scholars are debating whether Trump's public exhortations constitute a negotiation. His team argues it's mere political speech. Prosecutors and watchdog groups see a pattern of solicitation. This creates a perilous precedent. If this behavior is normalized, the very architecture of U.S. foreign policy, conducted through diplomatic channels and sanctioned by the State Department, crumbles. But the political and legal fallout is just one side of this explosive coin. The real-world consequences are already slamming into the global economy with the force of a freight train. Let's break down the economic carnage. The moment those first reports of a direct US-Iran clash hit the wires, the financial markets went into full-blown panic mode. Brent crude surged past $100 a barrel in chaotic trading, a threshold not seen in months. Analysts at Goldman Sachs, in a frantic client note, warned of a potential spike to $120 if supply disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz, that critical choke point for 20% of the world's oil, become a reality. This isn't just about numbers on a screen. This volatility translates directly to pain. The national average for a gallon of gas jumped 15 cents overnight. Shipping costs are skyrocketing as insurance premiums for vessels transiting the Middle East go through the roof. Every link in the global supply chain, still fragile from the pandemic era, is now getting hit with a massive new shock. The cost of everything from electronics to food is set to climb. The Federal Reserve, already walking a tightrope with inflation, now faces a brutal new dilemma: fight inflation with higher rates and risk crushing the economy, or let inflation run wild. The market volatility is breathtaking. The VIX, the so-called fear index, spiked over 40%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged over 800 points at the open, a sea of red across trading terminals. We're now staring down the barrel of a potential global recession. The European Central Bank is emergency meeting. China, the world's factory floor, is watching its export routes seize up. Emerging markets, which import food and fuel, are on the brink of a debt crisis. The International Monetary Fund is reportedly drafting contingency plans. The analysis from the corner offices is grim. We spoke to several chief economists at major banks, all speaking on background due to the sensitivity. The consensus? The world economy was already on a knife's edge. Growth in Europe was stagnant. China's property crisis was unresolved. U.S. consumer debt was at record highs. This conflict, they say, is the spark in the tinderbox. One veteran analyst put it to me bluntly: it's the perfect storm. You have a massive geopolitical shock colliding with pre-existing structural weaknesses in the global financial system. The central banks have limited ammunition left after the last crisis. Fiscal buffers in many countries are depleted. There is no cushion. This could get very ugly very fast. The direct impact of the military clash is one thing, but the direct impact of the military clash is one thing. The immediate kinetic reality on the ground is another. And tonight, we are getting a clearer and frankly alarming picture of the state of Israel's vaunted missile defense shield. This is the segment where we move from the financial tickers to the radar screens. The lead here is stark, based on multiple reports from defense officials speaking to our network and others. Israel is facing a critical and potentially decisive shortage of interceptor missiles for its Iron Dome and David's Sling systems. The numbers, according to a senior Western intelligence source, are not just concerning, they're borderline catastrophic. After weeks of sustained barrages, the stockpile of Tamir interceptors for Iron Dome is reportedly below 20% of its pre-war operational reserve. For David's Sling, designed for longer-range threats, the situation is said to be even more dire. The 5 Ws are clear. Who? The Israeli Defense Forces. What? A severe depletion of interceptor missiles. Where? Across the defense grid protecting population centers. When? As of this reporting, a real-time crisis. Why? An unprecedented rate of fire against salvos that are larger and more sophisticated than any seen before. This isn't just about running low on bullets. This is about the foundational promise of Israeli security, the high-tech dome that lets life go on under the threat of rockets, showing cracks. And when that promise breaks, the entire strategic calculus shatters. To break this down, we're bringing in an expert who has been on the ground assessing the aftermath of these strikes. Martaza Hussein is a former UN weapons inspector and a leading analyst for the International Crisis Group. He's just returned from the Negev and the border areas. Martaza, thanks for joining us. Martaza's voice came through, crisp and direct, with the weary authority of someone who's seen too many impact craters. He didn't mince words. What we're seeing, he said, is a classic case of defense economics meeting brutal reality. The Iron Dome is a phenomenal system, but it was built for a specific threat profile. Sporadic rocket fire from Gaza, largely unsophisticated. The interceptors cost around $50,000 each. The rockets they're shooting down, often a few $100 to make. It's a math problem. You can't bankrupt yourself defending against an enemy who can literally outproduce your bank account. But now, he explained, the threat has geometrically evolved. We're not talking about a few dozen Qassam rockets. We're talking about coordinated barrages of hundreds of missiles and drones, some with advanced countermeasures launched from multiple vectors. They're swarming the defense grid. The Federal Communications Commission, in a move that has sent shockwaves through newsrooms from New York to Los Angeles, is now quietly, persistently pressuring major broadcast networks and local affiliates to skew their coverage in a more patriotic direction. According to a bombshell report from the media watchdog group Free Press, based on leaked internal memos and over a dozen anonymous testimonies from network executives and producers, the pressure isn't a formal mandate. It's worse. It's a soft power gaslighting campaign. It's calls from FCC officials suggesting that certain angles on the conflict are unhelpful to national morale. It's veiled reminders about license renewals during conversations about editorial tone. It's the bureaucratic version of a Karen asking to speak to the manager, only the manager is the federal government and the complaint is about the truth. The message is clear. Patriotism is now part of the editorial rubric. And in this dystopian media landscape development, the line between journalistic duty and state-approved storytelling isn't just blurring, it's being deliberately erased. She told us, "The First Amendment protects us from government censorship, but it has a harder time protecting us from government persuasion. When the regulator starts whispering in the ear of the regulated about what constitutes responsible broadcasting, we've entered a gray zone of coercion. Chilling effects don't require a gun to the head. A raised eyebrow from a powerful bureaucrat is often enough." The fallout is already visible in the coverage. Watch the cable news cycles. Notice how the segments on the war's economic toll are now almost invariably followed by a panel on innovative defense financing or private sector solutions. See how the language has shifted. Quagmire becomes complex engagement. Strategic failure becomes adaptive challenge. Critics of the administration's policy are still interviewed, but more often than not, they're framed as the controversial perspective or placed alongside a patriotism expert who talks about the need for steadfast support. It's a masterclass in framing. The facts are still there, but the connective tissue, the moral weight, the urgent context, it's being surgically altered. This isn't about left or right, this is about power and narrative. The administration, facing the grim mathematics of war that we just detailed, needs a public that sees unwavering resolve, not a balance sheet, so the pressure filters down. The FCC, tasked with serving the public interest, is now being weaponized to define that interest as unwavering support. The narrative of control doesn't stop at reshaping the language of war. It extends chillingly into the realm of silencing the messengers. If the first act was linguistic gaslighting, the second is a direct confrontation with the Fourth Estate itself, and the flashpoint is Tucker Carlson. Here's the POV you weren't getting on the nightly news. In a series of explosive, direct-to-camera monologues, Carlson didn't just criticize the administration, he claimed he was being surveilled. He alleged that the Department of Justice, under the direction of Attorney General Merrick Garland, was actively building a case against him, with potential criminal charges on the table for his reporting. His crime? According to his framing, it was dissent. It was for questioning the official narrative on everything from vaccine mandates to the withdrawal from Afghanistan. He wasn't just a commentator anymore. In his telling, he was a target. Now, let's be clear, the administration's official line, delivered through tight-lipped press secretaries and carefully worded statements, is one of unwavering respect for the rule of law and the independence of the Justice Department. They say there is no politically motivated targeting. Any investigation, they maintain, would be based on evidence of genuine criminal wrongdoing, perhaps around the handling of classified information or allegations of conspiracy to defraud the government. The standard Washington playbook: hide behind the sanctity of process. But the context is everything, and it's a context dripping with irony. We are asked to believe that the same Justice Department, which under this administration has issued memos instructing prosecutors to be cautious in investigations involving the media, is simultaneously zeroing in on one of the most influential and most critical media figures in the country. A figure, it must be noted, whose primetime show was abruptly canceled by Fox News under murky circumstances that many insiders whisper were influenced by pressure from powerful corporate and political interests aligned with the administration. Coincidence or convenient cleanup? This is where we examine the pattern. The alleged targeting of Tucker Carlson isn't an isolated incident in this narrative. It's the sharpest point of a much broader spear. It follows a well-documented history from the previous administration of animosity toward critical media, but with a supposedly different ideological bent. The Trump era's enemy of the people rhetoric has been swapped for a more bureaucratic but no less potent toolkit. Leaks to friendly outlets painting certain networks as threats to democracy. Coordinated pressure on advertisers to pull support from shows deemed misinformation superspreaders. Israeli Heritage Minister Amichai Eliyahu, a member of the hardline Otzma Yehudit party, publicly acknowledged what the world had known, but Israel had never officially confirmed for over half a century: the existence of Israel's nuclear program. He didn't just hint at it, He weaponized the ambiguity, stating in a radio interview that one of Israel's options in the war against Hamas could be to, and we quote, do what needs to be done. When pressed by the interviewer if that meant using a nuclear weapon, he replied, "That's one way." This was a sitting member of the Israeli Security Cabinet, a man with direct access to the most sensitive national security discussions, openly discussing the unthinkable on public airwaves. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu suspended Eliyahu from cabinet meetings, calling his statements not based in reality, and the minister himself later walked back the comments, claiming they were metaphorical. But the damage was done. The metaphor had been launched, and it couldn't be called back. Analysis of the grave implications began instantly in capitals around the world. In Washington, the official response was a terse, deeply concerned statement from the White House, reiterating U.S. support for Israel's security, but emphasizing the expectation that Israel would, quote, continue its policy of nuclear ambiguity. A senior U.S. official, speaking on deep background to reporters, issued a dire warning that cut to the core of the new reality. The official said, and this is the POV from inside the Situation Room, that Eliyahu's statement was catastrophically irresponsible and had single-handedly lowered the threshold for nuclear rhetoric in the most volatile region on the planet. The official warned that this wasn't just about Hamas or Gaza anymore. It was a green light for every actor in the Middle East, from Iran's Ayatollahs to Saudi princes, to openly discuss their own nuclear options and ambitions. First, it provides Iran, which has long claimed its nuclear program is a response to Israel's unacknowledged arsenal, with a massive propaganda coup. They can now point to an Israeli minister and say, "See, we told you so." Second, it risks triggering a regional nuclear arms race, with Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states potentially fast-tracking their own pursuits, no longer feeling constrained by the fiction of Israel's non-acknowledgement. Third, and most chillingly, it introduces the concept of tactical nuclear use into a live, active, and brutal conventional war. It moves the discussion from the abstract realm of deterrence theory to the horrifyingly concrete realm of battlefield options. This is the new stark reality. The strategic Pandora's box has been flung wide open. The question is no longer if a nuclear weapon could be used in the Middle East, but when, how, and with what catastrophic consequences. This is the terrifying calculus now dominating war rooms from Tel Aviv to Tehran, from Riyadh to Washington. Let's break down Sachs's fears. They aren't born in a vacuum. They are the product of a specific, brutal reality, the perceived failure of conventional deterrence. From his POV, October 7th proved that Israel's traditional military supremacy and intelligence dominance can be catastrophically breached. The Hamas attack was a shock to the national psyche, a deep, festering wound that has fundamentally altered Israel's strategic doctrine. The old rules, the old red lines feel obsolete. When a minister publicly floats the nuclear option, it's a scream of existential panic disguised as policy. But this isn't just about Israel's trauma. This is about the reaction, and that's where the analysis gets truly dire. According to a recent report from the International Institute for Strategic Studies, the mere discussion of a tactical nuclear strike in Gaza, however officially walked back, has irrevocably lowered the nuclear threshold for every actor in the region. Iran is the immediate beneficiary. For decades, Tehran has gaslit the international community, framing its nuclear pursuits as a purely peaceful response to the shadow of an Israeli bomb it could never officially point to. Now they have their smoking gun. A senior Israeli official said the quiet part out loud. Iranian state media is already running wall-to-wall coverage, their anchors practically gleeful as they replay Sachs's statement saying, "See, the Zionist regime confirms its terrorist nature. Our program is justified." The second-order effect is a regional nuclear arms race on fast forward. Saudi Arabia has been an open secret in diplomatic circles for years. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has explicitly stated the kingdom will acquire nuclear weapons if Iran does. But the new variable is Israel's perceived vulnerability and its ministers' apocalyptic rhetoric. The calculus in Riyadh shifts. It's no longer just about matching Tehran, it's about having a seat at the table in a post-nuclear escalation Middle East. The fear of being left defenseless in a neighborhood where someone has already suggested using a tactical nuke could push the Saudis to accelerate their program, potentially with direct assistance from Pakistan, or even a clandestine deal with a desperate power. The nuclear non-proliferation regime in the Middle East, always fragile, is now facing its ultimate stress test. Now let's talk about the tactical part. This is where military analysts get the most pale. The term tactical is where the military jargon hits the fan and the reality gets terrifyingly simple. A tactical nuclear weapon isn't about ending a civilization, it's about winning a battle. It's the battlefield nuke, the small yield option that strategists and think tanks have coldly wargamed for decades. But here's the POV shift. When a nation-state minister, not some rogue general, floats its use, the game theory model breaks. The red line isn't just crossed, it's erased. Analysts are now staring at maps, calculating what a 1 kiloton blast on, say, a Hezbollah tunnel network in southern Lebanon would do. The immediate radiation, the fallout drifting over civilian populations in Israel, Lebanon, and Syria. It's not a clean win. It's a Pandora's box of instant escalation and permanent geopolitical poison. And this brings us to the convergence. The administration is now facing a perfect storm where every crisis is feeding the others. Let's connect the threads. First, the war front. The ongoing conflict is a bleeding wound, sapping military resources, international goodwill, and domestic political capital. Every day it continues is a day Iran and its proxies have to probe for weakness, a day the regional anxiety climbs. The Pentagon's latest assessment, delivered to Congress in a classified briefing, reportedly warns of unprecedented strain on missile defense systems and ammunition stockpiles. They're trying to fight a multi-front shadow war while preparing for a potential state-on-state conflict that could go nuclear. It's a logistical and strategic nightmare. Thread 2, the economy. Global markets are jittery. Oil prices are on a roller coaster based on rumors from the Strait of Hormuz. The cost of this prolonged military posture is astronomical, adding to a staggering national debt. Inflation, already a political headache, gets worse with every sanction and every supply chain disruption stemming from the conflict. The administration's economic advisors are reportedly in a state of quiet panic, warning that continued escalation could trigger a recession that makes 2008 look mild. There's a direct line from a missile launch in the Golan to the price of gas in Ohio and the interest rate on a car loan in California. Thread 3, the media and information war. This is where the gaslighting goes global. State-sponsored disinformation networks are running at full throttle, blurring the lines between fact and fiction. The administration's messaging is getting drowned out in this noise. They're trying to project strength and control, but the narrative is fragmenting. In the chaos, the truth about casualties, about intentions, about the real risk of nuclear use becomes the first casualty. Now, layer in the nuclear thread. It's the ultimate accelerant. Let's bring this home. This is the editorial close, the final segment, the part where we step back from the chaos and try to make sense of the rubble, because that's what this morning has left us with, a landscape of political, economic, and informational rubble. We opened this morning with a cold open, a flashpoint in the Golan Heights, a downed aircraft, and a missing pilot. That was the spark. Over the course of this broadcast, we've traced the 3 primary threads that have unraveled from that single event, threads that are now tightening into a noose around global stability. Thread 1, the geopolitical gambit. What was presented as a defensive action has morphed in real time into a high-stakes game of chicken with nuclear undertones. The administration's response, a rapid deployment and a terse statement about unacceptable losses, was calibrated for deterrence. But according to our sources in the Pentagon and the intelligence community, the reaction from adversarial capitals has been anything but subdued. We're seeing fleet movements, communications blackouts in key military districts, and a chilling escalation in rhetoric that has moved from consequences to explicit discussions of strategic postures. The quiet panic in the Situation Room we reported earlier stems from a brutal calculus. Every traditional ladder of escalation has been bypassed. We are in uncharted territory. Thread 2, the economic contagion. This is where the abstract becomes painfully concrete. The markets have spoken, and they are screaming. The Dow is not just down, it's in a state of free fall reminiscent of crisis triggers. Oil prices have spiked over 18% in pre-market trading, a shockwave that will hit every gas station, every shipping lane, every household budget by this time next week. The Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank are in emergency consultations, but as one former Treasury official told us off the record, the tools for a supply-side shock caused by geopolitical meltdown are blunt at best. Their warning stands. Continued escalation doesn't just risk a recession, it architects one that could dwarf 2008. Remember that line, from a missile launch in the Golan to the price at the pump in Ohio and the interest on a loan in California. That line is now a live wire. Thread 3, the information war. In many ways, this is the most insidious thread. The fog of war is no longer a natural byproduct. It is a manufactured weapon. State-sponsored disinformation networks are operating at an industrial scale, flooding digital zones with contradictory narratives, deepfake imagery, and fabricated atrocity reports. The goal is clear: to gaslight the global public, to erode trust in any single narrative, and to paralyze coordinated response.